Hello, friends. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here with my good friend Bruce Turkel. He is the author of the book, Is That All There Is? And we are going to be talking today about how to find and tap into a sense of purpose around your life and your career, and how to create a life that really, this is one of my topics of fascination, helps you play the long game. Bruce, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Wonderful. And we are here as part of our weekly series with Newsweek. We have a series called Better, where we talk about ways to ensure that we are making our lives and our careers better. So, as you are tuning in, please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are, where you're dialing in from, and questions that you may have for Bruce Turkel. So, Bruce, the first question that I have for you, you've written this book called "Is That All There Is?" Now, this sounds in some ways like a book about a midlife crisis. Now, I have read this book and I love it, but tell me, where did this come from, and where are we going with "Is That All There Is?" What's the sentiment that launched you into writing this book?
Well, first, let me correct a misconception. You can only have a midlife crisis if you know when mid is, which means you know when end of life is. Since none of us have any idea, the idea that you would have a midlife crisis at 35, 45, 55, whatever, is kind of specious because it's just a thing people like to say. I think where the idea came from, where the book came from, was in so many ways typical to what I do. It's something that I was exploring. I had run my branding firm, as you know, for 30 something years. We had pretty good success. We had offices in Latin America. We had great clients. And I got to the point where, as much as I loved what I did, the thought of continuing to do the same thing over and over really started to fill me with dread. And so I started talking to people who had successfully pivoted their lives to figure out what they did and how they did it. I had no idea that it was really the zeitgeist of our time, that anybody with any degree of relative success starts looking around and wondering what else is out there. And of course, I have to say, I was not prescient enough to know that we would all suffer from a worldwide pandemic that would make everybody say, really? I'm going to go back to that? But it turned out to be very timely.
It's true. I think there has probably never been a more timely moment for us
Right.
to be asking questions about who we are and where we're going than after the pandemic. So I think you definitely managed to put your finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist, Bruce. So I also want to ask something. If you, I believe you have it there, but if you can show us, you, as you mentioned, you ran a very successful branding agency, and so you obviously think differently about this than most people, but you have one of the most distinctive book covers for Is That All There Is that I have ever seen. Can you show it to us and explain your thinking about this?
Sure, sure. So this is the cover. This is what you see. The spine looks like that. The back cover looks like that. Now, you can see over my head, there's two books. Let's get this right there, back to back, and they spell out ITATI, which is the acronym for Is That All There Is? It's a palindrome. The idea was I really wanted to write a book or create a book where if you saw this laying somewhere, you would say, what the heck is that? And then you would pick it up and, huh? And then you would open it up. And by the way, there's no descriptor on the flap. And
It's a
so,
very mysterious book.
and that was the idea. You have to commit yourself to actually opening it and then looking through it and then seeing what it's all about. Why? Because I think it's a graphic explanation of the problem. We all live our lives. We're all going to work, raising our families, or being with our loved ones, or looking for our next loved one, or whatever it is, without actually thinking about it. It's an unconscious effort. And if you want to move forward, use your word, if you want to find purpose, you actually have to think about it. I mean, Socrates said, first know thyself. And so I wanted people who were curious, and people would look at it and say, what the hell is that? And then at some point while they were reading through it, they go, oh, I get it. It's a metaphor. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had a great review in Forbes last week, and the reporter said, I get books all the time. You're an author, Dorie. You know, we send these books and we write these little letters, and I'd love if you'd read it and review it. And some people do and some people don't. But he said, I got the book, I opened the envelope, I looked at it, I threw it on the pile with all the other books that I mean to get to, but I never do. But the cover kept like, what is that? And he finally said, I picked it up to look, and it didn't tell me. And he was so curious that he started reading. And then he gave me the best compliment he could give, which was he couldn't put it down because I was talking directly to him, back to the zeitgeist idea. So that was it. It's like a can of beans or an old record album or a billboard, something that would make you need to know more.
I love that. We're here with Bruce Turkel. You can learn more about him at bruceturkel.com. And this is Dorie Clark. We're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show. It's called Better. And to make sure you never miss one of our episodes, you can go to dorieclark.com. You can sign up, download a free self-assessment. You will get reminders about these wonderful weekly episodes. So we also want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in. We've got Priscilla from Silicon Valley. We have Karen from Boston, a faithful viewer. Ramtin from Vancouver, Joy's in Calgary, Janet's here in Wichita. We've got Surrender from Mountain House, California. We have Akin Remy from Dubai. This is great. We've got Sri Lanka in the house, Osho from Nigeria, Ahmad from Egypt, many more. We're so glad to have all of you here for the conversation. And please type your questions for Bruce Turkel into the chat box. We're talking about life. We're talking about meaning. We're talking about careers. We're talking about, is that all there is? So, Bruce, what I'm curious about, if there is someone who is watching this and they have been pursuing, as a lot of us were, frankly, up until the pandemic, maybe even beyond, but if someone has been fairly relentlessly pursuing a professional goal, they've been, maxing out, going all in, and because of what we've all experienced over the past 18 months, or, just personal reasons, they are starting to realize that perhaps that quest has maybe been a little more hollow than they would have anticipated. What advice would you offer for somebody who finds themselves in that very existentially difficult position? What can you do with that if you have a suspicion that something like that is brewing?
There's a couple things, and let me kind of give you the meta, the big picture, the 50,000 foot view, and then let me give you the hands-on, here's what you can do tomorrow. The meta view is exactly what I tried to figure out, which is, I can't be the only person going through this. What I learned is not only am I not the only person going through this, but everybody is going through this on some level. So I went out and I spoke to people. I spoke to people who had successfully changed their lives. I spoke to almost 50 people. I feature 14 of them in the book. And I asked them, tell me your story. Tell me how you got to where you are. Tell me why you needed to change, how you changed, and what happened. And it's fascinating when you talk to people, because what I learned from this, it's actually become a mantra for me. The facts are different, but the truths are universal. So somebody will tell a story and none of the facts relate to my life. They grew up in a different place. They went to a different school. They studied something different. Right? All of the facts are different, but the universal truths of what they're trying to accomplish, what they see, what they're looking for are similar. And I found this internationally, by the way, because I talk to people all around the world. And so I tried to document their stories and then pull out the proven tips. Now, the interesting thing is they don't all agree with each other, right? Some people said, always do this. Other people said, never do that. But even on the universal truths kind of thing, it's still related to who they were and what they did. What I discovered was there's three things that it seems like everybody is looking for. Number one, you said it, is purpose. It's not simply enough to get up, breathe, and exist, as much as that might sound to be, something that we'd want to do on an exercise mat in a beautiful morning. But there needs to be purpose. There needs to be a reason for what you do. Number two is passion. You need to do something that you have a passion for. It doesn't mean you have to have your passion for painting or music or whatever as part of your life, or your career rather, but that there has to be passion. You can't do these things without energy and excitement. And number three, there has to be pay. Now, once again, don't get me wrong, pay doesn't necessarily mean money. there's lots of ways people can get paid. Money is a great way. Some people do what they do for attaboys. Some people do what they do for spiritual significance. I'm not the one to decide what is the appropriate pay for you. But if you keep those three things in mind, what is my purpose? Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you figure out why. There's nothing you can do about the first one, obviously, and chances are you're not going to figure out the second one, but you can work towards it. So passion, purpose, and pay. And if you keep those things in mind and actually write them down and focus on them, what you'll discover is that a lot of choices that come your way are easier to either accept or push or say no to because they don't fulfill what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you very much. We're here with Bruce Turkel. You can learn more about him. His website is bruceturkel.com. And I want to say hello to some of the great folks tuning in. We have even more folks joining us. Cheryl's here from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Catherine's here from Marin. Hi, Catherine. We have Anita from Half Moon Bay. We've got Inessa from Armenia. We have a LinkedIn user from Norway. This is great. Megan's here. Anna is here from New Hampshire. We have Jackie in from Yorkshire with Patricia from Lagos. So many more folks tuning in, and we're glad to have all of you. Please type your questions for Bruce Turkel into the chat box. We're talking about, is that all there is? How can we make sure that we are maximizing the value of our lives and making smart career choices that will lead to the outcomes that we want, which is a topic that I have been very interested in for a long time, and in many ways is the focus of my book, The Long Game. So, Bruce, I'm always interested as someone who writes books as well. I often use books as a kind of research vehicle for myself for topics that I want to explore and understand. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about how you selected the folks that you profiled, and also what are the learnings that you've taken now that you've spent time with these 50 plus people soaking in their wisdom. What changes have you made in your life based on what you did learn?
Well, they're quite extensive. I'll tell you about those. The way I chose the people, first of all, I had a misconception. I thought I was going to speak to people who were significantly older than you and I. I'm older than you, but older than you and I. And I started talking to people in their 70s and 80s, thinking those would be the right people. And they were, but then they would lead me to other people. And I went so far as to talk to a guy who was in his 30s who had made significant life changes and talked about what he did and why he did it. So to start, I found people who I knew had pivoted for some reason or another. And, it's one of those things when you start turning over the leaves, all of a sudden new opportunities arise. So I would talk to somebody about what I was doing. And they'd say, oh my God, you have to talk to my cousin, or you have to talk to my uncle, or I know a person, I know a guy, and I know a woman. And that's where it came from. It really just grew organically. And again, I would ask them all the same things. Tell me your story. Tell me how you got to where you are. Tell me why you decided to change, and then tell me what happened. I'm a big fan of a musician by the name of Rick Beato. He has a YouTube site where he looks at music. Why is this a great song? And he picks them apart. The guy, he's a savant. He's incredible. He's so much beyond me that I just geek out listening to him. But he did a video called The Day That Changed My Life. So I watched it. I called him up. I got him on the phone. And I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's the project. I'd love to involve you. I'd love to talk to you about it. And he turned out to be a great interview. So it was catch as catch can. Let's see what comes up. Let's see who recommends who. What did I learn? What did I change? Well, I learned lots of things. And in fact, after every interview, I kind of took out the nuggets that each person offered, put them in a little list. And then I also compare and contrast so you can see some of the things to do. But I went so far as to sell my business. I had 70 something employees. I had the multiple offices in Latin America. I sold the business. I sold the office building. I walked away from that. It took me a couple of years. I did it responsibly. My partner and I left on good terms, which I'm very proud about. But I wrote the book, which was a life change, because as you know, my last 5 books were all on branding and marketing. My publisher wanted the sequel to my last book. I tried to write it and I had no interest. And I went off on this project. I completely changed the way I work with clients, because in the old days, I provided soup to nuts services through the agency everything they needed, everything, let's face it, they would pay us for. I changed that because I figured out what my passion, purpose, and pay was. I figured out what my highest and best use was. I figured out what my skill stack was. And I completely focus on those things. I say no to more projects than I say yes to now. I turn down wonderful opportunities that I know are not going to get me where I want to go, regardless of whether or not it would be a good business. And so I also pared back on what my day-to-day responsibilities were as far as making payroll, making sure taxes were paid for all those people, so that I had more freedom to do what I wanted to do.
I love that. That's a great answer, Bruce. Thank you so much. And a question came in from Surrender. He's curious about your thoughts on career change.
That's a great question.
Yes, I mean, obviously, a lot of the folks that you profiled in and in your book, Is That All There Is, had engaged in various forms of career pivots over time. So I'm curious, and now you've been pivoting your own career. So what are your thoughts and your advice for someone who is at the early part of that journey?
Well, Surrender, I got to tell you, I love the question. Tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite business authors. So it makes me happy just to be able to use his term. But I'll tell you what it was for me. I went to see a friend of mine. You might know her, a woman named Susan Ford Collins. She wrote The Joy of Success, The Technology of Success. She's a very good friend of mine. And I told her about what I was going through. And she said, let me ask you a question. When you go back to your office, do the people in your office give you presents? I looked at her, I said, I don't know what that means. She says, well, when you go out to find new business or to deal with clients or whatever it is you do, when you come back, do your employees, partners, the people in your office come up to you and go, metaphorically, of course, hey, look what I did for you today. Hey, look at this, and hand you presents? And I said, well, yeah, my business partner does. He runs the business. I don't do that. My CFO does. I don't have to deal with the taxes and that stuff. My assistant does. Some of our art directors and writers, they show me things that I never would have thought of. So yeah, some of them do. She says, or do you feel like the mother bird coming back to the nest and all those little birds are in there chirping, chirp, 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 and you have to drop worms in all their mouths? And that mind picture, I actually drew it. Dorie knows that I always doodle when I take notes. And I doodled that picture in my notebook. And that mind picture became firmly burned into my skull. And all I saw were those little featherless, gross looking little tiny birds with the red and white, the white and yellow throats going, gee, 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 gee. And it was my job to drop more. I couldn't go back to my office anymore. It was truly, Surrender, this was a tipping point. I mean, I told you, it took me a good 2 years to unravel and do it properly. But that was the point. When she gave me that picture that I could see, that I could visualize, I'm a very visual person. And when she gave me that, that was it for me. I couldn't make excuses anymore. I couldn't say, well, I'm unhappy now, but it'll be better tomorrow. I knew I had to make a change.
I love that, Bruce. Yeah, it's the burning platform, right? It's understanding, oh, this is something that is not just a nice to have. This is something that we have to make the change.
Right. It's burning the boats on the beach. It's the platform. It's the stairwell burning from the bottom up. There's so many metaphors for it. Susan just helped me find my own, and once I did, as you say, it was a have to do, not a want to do.
Yeah, that's great. We want to greet some of the wonderful folks who are tuning in here. Felix is here from Munich. We have Patrick here from Bachnang, Germany. So Germany is definitely in the house. We're happy if you're here tuning in from Germany or anywhere. You are welcome from around the world. We're here with Bruce Turkel. He's the author of the new book, Is That All There Is? And we're here with Newsweek's weekly series, Better, about how to improve the quality of your life. Now, Bruce, something I'm curious about, is this just when we reach the "is that all there is" stage, is this just the inevitable consequence that people get bored? You know, people have done things for a long time and they want a new challenge? Or is it that something has perhaps gone wrong in the process if we are finding ourselves asking the "is that all there is" question? How do you think about this? Is this something that literally everyone goes through and it's just sort of a natural life stage? Or are there things that we could, or is it actually a state that we need to be concerned about? Like, oh, maybe there's preventative measures we should be taking somehow.
So the answer to your is it this or that is yes. It is both something that people go through and also something that can be brought on by occurrences. You know, realtors say the reason somebody buys or sells a house, I believe they call it the 7 Ds: disease, death, debt, downsizing, disability, and there's two more. And I would say there's 9 Ds why people decide to change their lives. The 7 the realtors have given us, plus disappointment and disillusionment. You become disappointed. Like, all I ever wanted to do in my case was be an art director and run a design firm. And I did it. And then okay, now what? So there's disappointment and there's disillusionment. But there's also good things. There's plenty of people who decide, okay, I have reached a point where I can now go do something different. My father built a very successful business. He sold it in his early 50s. In his 20s, he had been a civil rights activist, both my parents. And my dad was able to sell his business. And then he worked in the inner city building clinics and housing and all these other things. His pay was clearly feeling good about what he was doing. He didn't get paid for it, but he reached a stage in his life where he could do what he wanted to do. My dad's joke used to be the best day in his life was the day my youngest brother graduated from college. He sold the boat and the dog died. The idea being he had no more college tuitions to pay for, got rid of the boat, got rid of the dog, and now he could focus on what mattered to him. So it could be either one. However, I will tell you that one of the things that I found in the research is we have access to so much information that it's no longer acceptable to any of us to just do our job and then go home and shut up. I mean, you think about when whoever in your family emigrated, if you live in the US, to this country or to wherever you live, whether it was you, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they came and a job was about making money. My grandfather came to this country from Poland. He didn't speak the language. He wasn't educated. He got a job. He did a better job. He ultimately started a business. He was successful. If I would have explained to my grandfather that I didn't feel fulfilled in my job, he wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. And his English was fine by the time I came along. I wouldn't have had to do it in Polish or Yiddish. But he would not have understood. My wife came from Cuba. If her grandparents, who worked in shoe factories when they got here, if we would have said to them, I don't find what I do fulfilling, it would not have been in their mindset.
Kids these days.
Yeah, it made no sense to them. They'd look at what we have and say, what are you talking about? So it made sense that they had a job. They looked forward to retirement, and then they sat on the porch, played golf, went bowling, did whatever. That made sense. It doesn't make sense to any of us. And therefore, we are all going to run into this, either because you're not going to get where you want to go, disillusionment, or even worse, you're going to get where you wanted to go and then say, is that all there is? It is a tipping point, to use Surrender's word, something that you are going to reach, as at least my research shows it, at some point or another.
Wow, well, that's a powerful wake up call. We're here with Bruce Turkel. You can learn more about him. He's at bruceturkel.com. His new book is called Is That All There Is? We want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in. We have people from all around the world. We have Paul here from Vancouver. Gabriel's here from Mexico. More and welcome, and we are here learning about how we can harness our sense of purpose and really reclaim meaning in our lives, in our careers. And a question that is great, I think, that came in for you, Bruce, from Anita. She wants to know, how do you overcome the fear of making a change, especially late in life? Do you do it incrementally, or what would you suggest? Do we rip off the Band-Aid, or do we go a little bit slower?
So I'm glad you brought that one up, because I was reading through the list and I was thinking, oh, how do I interrupt Dorie and say we have to answer this question? Let me give you again, suggestions and advice I heard. No one said this, but I was able to glean it. Remove the romantic notion of saying, take this job and shove it. You know, we've heard that song, or I'm going to go with my boss and I'm going to tell her what I think, or I'm going to tell him, or I'm going to go do this. Get rid of that, because that will cause you to do things that probably you're not best served by doing, simply because it feels good at the moment. You know, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't necessarily jump in with both feet. Don't quit your day job. I'm trying to think how many other bad sayings I can use, right? But we have that sense of, you know what? I heard Bruce and Dorie talk, and I'm going to march right in. Please don't do that. Think about this rationally. Understand who you are and what you want. My guess is if you stop and think about that, you're going to realize you don't actually know. I'm not picking on anyone here, certainly not you, Anita, but you don't know. I mean, I ask people now all the time, because it's what I do, right? What do you want? And most of them, other than saying to be rich, which is silly, because where do you draw the line? Is that Bill Gates rich? Or is it now Elon Musk rich? Or is it just Dorie Clark rich? I mean, where do you draw the line, right? But they'll say the other two things are, I want to be happy, which, come on, what does that mean? I'm going to go around smiling all the time? Or is it joyful? Is it, you know, or they say, I want to be fulfilled. Okay, good. Doing what? They don't know. And this went back to my agency days, when I would say to a client, what do you want? If we do our job, what happened? Because if we didn't know that, we could do a great job and still get fired. And anyone in business knows acquisition is expensive. Retention is a much better strategy. So how did we keep our clients? We found out what they wanted. And they would say, oh, I want more business. So let's say it was a hotel chain we were talking to. I want more business. And I'd say, okay, so cut your prices in half. What? Cut your room rates in half. What are you talking about? Well, if you cut your room rates in half, twice as many people will come. You'll have more business. No. We want to make more money per room. Oh, okay. Double your rates. What? Double your room rates. What are you talking about? Well, if you double your room rates, you'll make more money per room. Yeah, but we'll sell less rooms. You didn't say that. And so I wasn't being flippant. We were peeling back the onion. So you want more people to come to your hotel, and you want them each to spend more money. Okay, then let's look at your brand and other things. It's the same thing in your life. What do you want? I want to be happy. I want to be fulfilled. I want to be rich. Okay, if you quit your job, is that going to happen? No, it's actually not. The idea is to figure it out and then use your job as a launching pad to get to where you want to go. You have plenty of hours in the day you can spend researching other things, looking into other opportunities. Dorie and I will both tell you, writing books is, in my case, a joy. I think you like writing. I don't know. Some writers hate it. I don't know. I love to write. It's not necessarily a good business idea. You might make money from it, but I wouldn't count on it. It's like playing in bands. You know, they say you can make a killing, but you can't make a living. So if you have to think of how are you going to take those skill sets and utilize them in new ways. I speak at conferences. When I get up on stage, I play music. I draw pictures. I get paid for doing that. But if I were to go out and simply play music for money, I may not be able to make a living. Or to draw cartoons for money, I don't think I could make a living. So it takes thought. I know that was a long answer, but it's a critical question. And I don't want anybody going in there and saying, take this job and shove it. Bruce told me to tell you that. Don't do that.
That's right. Bruce does not want you coming to him and complaining later on.
Or
So,
borrowing
so
money.
listen up. That's right. Oh, wonderful. Well, I couldn't agree more, Bruce. I mean, in my book, Reinventing You, I talk a lot about the question of how do we pivot? How do we make career transitions? And sometimes people will say, well, how do I make a big transition? And often what I'll say is, don't try to make small transitions so that nothing ever has to feel like it's an enormous leap. The metaphor of, taking the leap just seems so terrible and precarious. And I think it often prevents people from doing anything because, quite rightly, they are hesitant to do something that feels very risky financially and emotionally. So I think oftentimes the better course of action is to take small steps and test things out so that you actually have a better chance of seeing what works and getting there incrementally.
And if I can add, someone in the book, one of the people I interviewed said, one of his quotes was, "You can't cross a chasm with two jumps," which is the opposite, because again, people gave both sides. And he talked about his life. But the interesting thing was, as successful as he was in all these things, his changes all came from a disaster where he had no choice. He was a tennis player. He didn't get ranked high enough. He realized this ain't going to work. Then he started a business, which he sold, and he worked for the company that hired him. I mean, that bought him out, and he grew the business. And then they fired him. And so then he went into a retail business, and it was very successful until the 2007 crash. He was on Wall Street, and that went out. So his answer is yes, you jump, you jump, you jump, because he was always jumping out of burning fires or burning buildings. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do for everybody.
That's right. But it does mean when there is a fire, jumping is a good idea.
Get out. Right. Yes. Get out.
Absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful. We have been here with Bruce Turkel. You can learn more about him and his work at bruceturkel.com. His new book, well worth checking out, Is That All There Is? We're so happy to have Bruce here. We're so happy to have all of you here. And you can tune in next week. Every week, we're here at noon Eastern on Thursdays, 9 a.m. Pacific for Newsweek. Bruce Turkel, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you.
Dorie. It's a treat. Every time I get to spend time with you, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and take care.